Yeah, hi everyone. It's Billy here again from 47 Wolves. All I am. Hope you're all well, and thank you very much again for joining me. Welcome back to magnificent Martin Arnett from Arcanum Vita. Welcome, Martin. Thank you very much again for joining us.
Good on you. Thanks, Billy. It's so good to be back and good to talk to you again.
Very
And
good.
yeah, really appreciate being here and love what you're doing. And I just got to start too by saying, really inspired by the journey you're on at the moment, Billy, and the way you're hitting it and the way you're approaching it, and just the honesty with which you're going at it. I don't know. I just think I just want to share that with you before we get stuck in, Billy. I'm really, really inspired by that, and I just think that's so human and so real and so good. And so, yeah, congratulations, and yeah, we're sending you all our positive healing energy
Uh,
too, Billy,
Thank you. I
because
appreciate that.
yeah, no, all
Yeah,
good, man, all good.
I said to someone yesterday, if receiving love counts for anything, and I'm healed already because I've quite overwhelmed by the abundance of love and compassion and kindness that I've received. So thank you very much for your beautiful words there, mate.
Yeah,
I
no, all
appreciate
good,
that.
all
Yeah.
good. Because
No,
in many ways, the disease is the I don't know. The disease is the lesson, really, isn't it? Like it's the thing from which we grow, not from which we suffer. So yeah, you're really teaching us that, reminding
thank
us
you.
that anyway, Billy. So
Reminding,
it's
yeah,
good.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Thank you.
totally.
Yeah,
No,
and
all good stuff.
all right. So we're heading into the new moon in May for
Yes,
Taurus new moon. So
absolutely.
yeah,
So
yep.
we've got a Taurus new moon coming up on the 8th of May, at 18 degrees of Taurus, and I mean, gosh, hasn't Aries been a cracker? Like, I mean, we had that eclipse. We've had the retrograde, the Jupiter Uranus conjunction in Taurus. Thank goodness retro Mercury's station now going direct. Like, so at the time of hearing this, Mercury will be well and truly direct. Like by about the 14th, it clears its shadow phase that we went in. Way back in sort of March, late March kind of thing. So now by now we're sort of right on the process of actually moving forward again and getting out of that shadow. So to me, that whole thing, with the Scorpio full moon as well, like the full moon um, at 4 degrees of Scorpio, like all of that really just screams transformation of self, really, like on whatever level. Like it's just, and when I say self, not just self as in life, but like our self, our identity, or who we are, or how we approach things, or the place from which we come. Like that's been just a ginormous process. I'm sure like it was right on my chart. Like I copped it square on, but like it was a very powerful very powerful process of transition through self, and really looking at who we are and where we're going, and what that intention is, or what that drive is behind us, or even just to summarize it, our identity, like what we identify with, which is ultimately Aries, I guess. And so as we move into the new moon in Taurus, which is essentially, Taurus is about manifestation and arrival at form. So in Aries, we emerge out of the ocean of infinite potential into an idea of self, or an initiating principle, or just the statement of I am. And then in Taurus we arrive at what value that has, or what that would manifest, or how that takes form in the world. And usually Taurus is associated, it's an earthly sign, so it's associated with form and matter, but not so much hard form, but actual experience of form. So Taurus is associated with the senses, or it's associated with aesthetics, or the thing we call beauty, or artistic sort of just appreciation comes through Taurus. So Taurus is really a sign of the senses and our experience of the material world. So that ultimately is a Venusian principle, which I guess can fall under the things we also call self-worth or value. Or so really, if we have an idea of ourself and our identity, and then we have our set of values, then that's ultimately what's going to go a long way to determining what takes place, or what is. So it's who we think we are and what we value that ultimately guides our direction in life. So essentially, this Taurus for the year, we now are entering that energy of appreciation and senses and determination. But ultimately too, if we look at the process of manifestation, or the process of bringing that undefined self into form, really Taurus also speaks to of what we desire, our desire nature, or what it is that sort of draws us, draws us forward, or kind of, I suppose, impels us to seek or acquire or attain. It's that purpose to which we direct our will. So yeah, Taurus has all those characteristics. But yeah, it's going to be a nice change from the intense Aries workover that we've just had. But yeah, it's good. That's coming up on the 8th. It's interesting too that as we come up to this new moon, there is this, I guess, process of dissolution that's really in effect here. Like, I mean, one might say that with all that Aries work that we've just done, it's all quite affirmative and quite orientated now, and technically speaking, we should be able to then reset it, realign our goals and bring things into form. But the background to it all has this very strongly Neptunian sort of process of dissolution at work at the moment too, where Neptune is in Pisces at the very final degree of Pisces. Over the last week or so, we've had Mars, the ruler of Aries, actually going over Neptune as well with the conjunction. Even as we speak today, like when we're recording this, in the sky, Mars and Neptune are conjunct, sort of dissolving our old ideas of things, dissolving our solid ideas around forms and things like that. And so, in this process of new burgeoning of form, there's also this sort of counterbalance process of absolute dissolution of form. So, to me, to summarize, like, we can, I'll get more into it, but like to summarize, yeah, we're in a process of liquidation, so to speak. Like things are really, dissolving. 29 Pisces is quite the end of the cycle. It's the last degree of the last part in the cycle. So, there is this sort of determining background to matter, or this determinate Neptunian factor at work, which is in its final expression of form. And at that point, it is formless. There's nothing really there. So if we're all feeling a bit lost or a little bit disorientated or a little bit sort of overwhelmed, it's part of the course. Like it's like in fact the symbol for this particular degree of Pisces is like an ocean. If you imagine an ocean and a giant rock in the ocean where the waters lap against the coastline and it's dark and moonlit, there's this image where if we look through the shadows of the moonlight into the ocean, there's this rock there which takes on the image of a face. And so it's that idea where we can, if we like, project whatever we want into the illusion or into the mist, so to speak, or into the fathomless, and start to see whatever it is we want to emerge as a reflection. But ultimately, it really is just something solid amidst the ocean. Like it's just something taking place amidst the ocean, and we're ultimately the ones that project onto that what it looks like. And so we really are in this, as a collective, we're really in this energy of formation out of a great process of liquidation. And, that'll come in more and more, which I'll talk about. There's Saturn and Neptune are coming up together. But how have you been going, Billy? How have you felt?
Yeah, no, exactly what you're saying, Martin. Just having, it's funny, just talking to different various people, we're all walking our different paths, but there definitely seems to be some constants in the themes of how everyone's feeling. So we're, regardless of our birth charts and star signs and everything else, we seem to be collectively all feeling similar. A lot of people exploring who they are, a lot of people exploring what their beliefs are, so they're not and there's some people obviously that want to maintain the status quo, and they're hanging on for dear life of what they've always believed in, and their with their upbringing and everything else, and that's their journey, and we can dive into that a little bit later. But the people that I sort of have been talking to recently have that awareness where maybe not all was what it seemed, that disillusionment you talked about. So they're really open-hearted and open-minded enough that they're talking about that. They're exploring that internally. So there definitely seems to be a shift, and I think in many cases, by understanding and having that awareness that maybe all wasn't what they thought it was, that makes it an easier transition to move into that blank canvas, the rock analogy you talked about, and that co-creation that we know we've all got that power within us. So
absolutely, Billy. Yeah,
I guess
absolutely.
When you're having conversations, people do reflect back sometimes on how you're feeling internally. So it's been amazing for me, Martin, just recently and going through what I'm going through. Without being the victim, self-empowerment's been huge for me in the last little while. I've really rediscovered that and the importance of that, and how that co-creates our existence and our what lies ahead. So, and then to hear other people not necessarily going through what I'm doing or whatever, everyone's got their own path, but talking the same language and feeling similar in similar modes. So
absolutely. And in a way too, that's that just to sort of feel into it even more, that's that Pluto now in Aquarius, there's not only are we sort of shifting away from a more sort of fundamental Capricornian three-dimensional type construct, but Aquarius has this sort of unification value to it, where it's not like we're one whole, like as in we all merge into this formless one, but there's this unification of experience. So on a consciousness level, I guess we're probably becoming more aware on a day-to-day basis of the energy that we all find ourselves in. So there's this greater awareness emerging. Okay, I've got my own stuff going on and you've got your stuff going on, but there's this sort of more collective awareness going on, where probably what in astrology, say for argument's sake, all the outer planets, like Neptune and Uranus and Pluto, which would prior to such a shift as now have played themselves out through various thematics in the collective consciousness. But now there's this sort of emerging generalized conscious awareness of the human condition, I guess, the condition that we find ourselves in, and not just being so responsive to conditions, but being aware of our condition. That's really emphasized, I feel, by the transits that we're getting. Even looking at the new moon that we're coming up to now, Mercury and Chiron are conjunct in this new moon in Taurus. So here we are sort of entering a new realization after having a huge process around self, looking at who we are and what we're doing and what it means to us, and all these sort of and it just being really tested on that who am I level. We get to move into this next energy now where we appreciate that from a new sensory perspective, and we start to sort of look at it as in what's it all worth, or what am I worth, or how am I feeling, as in what am I picking up on, what am I sensing, what are my senses telling me, what do I find aesthetically pleasing, what am I appreciating here, what do I appreciate in all this. As that's happening, Mercury and Chiron come together in Aries, and that's basically healing our way of thinking, or healing. Chiron's a healing energy, and it sort of prompts us to bring up the nasties, so to speak, for the purposes of healing. And Mercury, our thought processes and our communications and our sort of the way we move around and interact and all those types of things, that's conjunct to that energy. So, we've come out of this self-evaluation phase into looking at what it is that's important to us, while at the same time having an opportunity to really focus on or look into the very thought processes or the words that we use or the way we go about things, and how they truly reflect our sense of self and identity, because it's in Aries. So again, there's this next layer of okay, what are you worth and what are you value? Well, before you can really determine that, how are you thinking? What are you saying, and what are you thinking, and what's directing your thoughts, and where are you coming from, and that type of thing. So there's a real, it may be old messages around, oh, you're not good enough, or this is not that, and or you're this, or we look at self-validation or getting validation from something. This process in a way puts us in touch with what's of real value, so that we can actually look at what's important to us, and get into that self-validation through our own messaging and through our own dialogue with self, rather than having it try and seek that in others, or to seek that reflection through another process, and that essentially just puts us into, a greater position of creative control, I guess. And the word control is a bit much, but creative license is probably the best way to put it, where, rather than actually, again, being subject to things, we become the co-creator in things, but that's a pretty important bit of action there too, because like even the eclipse that we had last month and the new moon, that was totally on Chiron, and then we had Venus conjuncting Chiron recently, which looked at our healing ourselves as a self in relation to others, and now we get to have a look at Mercury on Chiron, where we get to work out what we're thinking and saying, and whether or not that truly reflects our creative purposes or our identification with things. But there's a lot going on there, in this new moon too. But again, it speaks to a process moving forward of evolving, of shifting out of an old restrained consciousness into something a little bit more, up with the times, so to speak. It's a revolutionary vibration, Pluto in Aquarius. And I guess where I started from there was that we're all getting kind of plugged in and hooked up in this more collective experience, but at the same time, that awareness is guiding our more personal experience in it. So I think that's quite exciting too.
Would it be fair, Martin? That's awesome. Would it be fair to say what I'm feeling while I'm listening to you, and then just reflecting on how I'm feeling and other conversations I've been having recently? What you're saying there with our desires and our thought forms, as far as what our beliefs are, of how we've been brought up, and like you said, am I good enough, and all these questions a lot of us ask ourselves. And that's quite constricting, and that's almost making us smaller, and that's how a lot of us have led our lives. There seems to be a real opportunity now, and a window, so to speak, to start the other way, and to move that shift to expansiveness, and to open our hearts and our minds internally, but with collectively as well. And it feels like a real invitation to me to explore and to let go of those beliefs that were limiting, that were really restricting on who we are. And a lot of them, when we do explore them, and I can only speak from my own personal experience, but in saying that others have said similar, that it's debilitating, that it's really letting go of those belief systems haven't served us at the way we probably thought they were. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, Billy. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so many different ways my brain went off there when you were saying all that. Like it's and even particularly in Taurus, if we look at it, our desire nature, or if you think of the world of Taurus, it's the world of manifest form. But like, what is manifest form? Well, obviously, a prerequisite to that is the sensory. And so, like, if we limit ourselves to old constructs or old forms or old, attachments, even, then the energy for experience is diminished by the fixation to whatever it is that it looks like, so to speak. So, and if even just from a chakra point of view, like desire, or the desire nature, rests around the navel, and essentially, like, if you become stuck in form, or if you limit yourself with say a misdirection of our desire nature. And when I say desire nature, I mean just the actual impetus for us to want to create or attain or whatever. It's just, the human nature, I believe on some level, human nature is one of the factors of human nature is this desire nature. Like we desire things, and whether that be comfort, security, or whatever, but it's the thing that impels us to participate on the three-dimensional level. Like it's part of our material experience. So ultimately, if we have misplaced desires, we go and chase the wrong things, and then that sets up this glamour or illusion. And usually glamour and illusion is what directs our desire. So like there's this interplay there between what the media says we should have, and therefore that's the illusion. And so our desire nature goes off after it, and then we find ourselves running round and round in circles, trying to attain these unachievable forms, and find ourselves lost, and despondent and disillusioned and all those types of things. But essentially, it's our desire nature that ultimately sets us up to orientate ourselves to something, right? So if we're limited around that capacity, then energy is just basically contained in the form world. And so if you can have a healthy orientation to both desire and form, then the potential to energetically open yourself up through things like, the moving up through the chakras, even, just through solar plexus and, heart space, and opening the throat and opening the imagination and those types of things, then we're no longer confined to this finite sense of form. We're able to move more openly through different frequencies, even different levels of energy, so that our mind becomes far more, engaged or active in the creative process. So, if we do become like, I suppose, even when you're looking at, synesthesia, or, opening up to different sensory experiences, as we move out into these different reaches of the senses, we start to become more aware of the confinement that is offered in fixed form. And so, like, I guess if you look at it just from a purely energetic point of view, now that we are getting a greater appreciation through Pluto and Aquarius around frequency and vibration and things that are all of an Aquarian nature, then we're starting to become more acutely aware of how potentially limiting or restricting definite form can be on the way we operate and the way we live our lives. So, I mean, just to be very simple about it, if we're kind of stuck in this idea that we've got to be A, B, and C and tick these boxes, then yes, that's okay. That's a fixed form. That's a fixed form of mind. That's a fixed form of operation. In that life, we have fixed forms of objects. We have our possessions. We have our material attachments and all those types of things. That's great. Like, we are here for a worldly existence, and we are here for a three-dimensional experience. But if those forms then become completely encompassing and become completely, I guess, consuming in the fact that we have to maintain them, or we're not allowed to move beyond them, or we're not allowed to experience anything outside of them, due to whatever conditionality is around that, then of course we're going to be subject to an over extreme of form, and then the fluid nature of life starts to creep in the form of disorientation, or I guess dissolution and all those types of things, if they're not appropriate forms, if they are required to be dissolved or required to be sort of remorphed into some other expression, because energy ultimately gets trapped in form. So, like, the more we maintain a formed existence, the more energy is invested in that structural approach and appreciation, and sooner or later that energy becomes less and less available, and we find ourselves being dimmed by the very forms that we are trying to maintain. So, like, I guess what I'm getting at too is that the reason I sort of go into that detail is because if we look at the energy of now and what's really going on, it's so dissolutionary. It's so Neptune. Like, Neptune at 29 degrees is extremely dissolving. Like, I mean, it wouldn't be too much of a reach to sort of absolutely feel completely disconnected from form altogether. Like, it'd be like, wow, it doesn't mean, nothing really means much to me at all anymore. Like, all I'm sensing really is this new feeling, this new vibration. Like, there's this tingling in the waters, so to speak, that suggests something's coming around the corner, whether that be reinvention or on another level, it could be apocalyptic. Like, this sense of revelation is upon us now, where we don't know what next, or who, or where, or up, or what's true, or what's not true, or those types of things. Like, it's really, we are in that undefined space which defies form. Like, I guess that's the point.
Yep.
It really does defy form, because it's asking us to disengage from form momentarily enough to reattach to new forms and open up to new ideas and open up to new possibilities, like, in that way. So it's very, we are in a state of flux. Yeah.
What came to me then, Martin, I hope this is relevant, but I pictured an eagle sitting on the ground, and if they're like a baby eaglet, has never flown, is just sitting on the ground, and that's its world. So energetically and visually and all its senses only knows what's around it, and that might be a tree, or it might be just whatever surroundings. But then it starts to flap its wings and slowly gets up to the maybe the top of the tree. So suddenly a whole new world opens energetically, visually. It's oh wow, I didn't know this existed 2 minutes ago when I was on the ground. That's all I knew. And if it didn't believe that it could fly, then it would stay on the ground and just walk everywhere, and that would be its existence, and very limiting, because it didn't know its empowerment, it didn't know its potential. So and then it hits the tree and goes, okay, well, if I just went from A to B, I went from the ground to the tree, what else is out there? What else can I explore? Where else can my energies go? What that creation and that let's go, let's see what else can go. So they start flapping their wings, and I see the eagle flying into the air as we see, and suddenly the whole world's expansive, and they can not just stay in that area, they can visually see so much further, they can fly wherever they want, and their whole world opens up. And I don't know if that analogy fits into what you're saying, but that's what came to me when you were saying that.
Absolutely, that absolutely resonates. Like, I mean, that's the whole point. It is perspective. Like, it really is perspective. Like, the energy is one thing, but the energy we're in, if that eagle was to stay on the ground, the eagle would probably experience that new potential in waiting as just some undefinable urge to do something. Like, I mean, it'd be like, oh my God, like, I don't know what's going on here, but either way, it just feels tense. It feels like I don't need to be here.
And also, if that eagle's all that eagle's been taught so far is this is your life, you can't fly, you this is it, which relating that to all of us as humans, what we get told and what we believe in ourselves, what we teach ourselves, and restrictions there. But but at the same time, and what seems to be happening now is we've had these restrictions that we've taught ourselves or been taught, and that we've held on to in some cases with dear life, but at the same time we're getting those urges and those desires to go, hang on, there's something else out here, and what's happening now is not working for me, but I have this inner knowing that there's more. I can become more. I'm more. There's more to me. There's more to life. There's more expansion available.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Sorry to cut you short there.
No, you're right, Billy. That's exactly the type of vibration. Like, I mean, in a way too. Like, I mean, that's even one of the symbols of this new moon. Weirdly enough, like, it's actually the image of a flag turning into an eagle. Like, there is this eagle symbol in one of the aspects, which is interesting. I thought, that's cool, you picked up on that. But it's that ability or that realization that we can put our principles into action. Like, if we have an embodying principle, if we've got some sort of thing going on inside us, and like, we know that we're an eagle, but we don't quite know we're an eagle, but the eagle inherently knows it's an eagle. That's not really expressed properly until it's put into action. And like, so, we've all, even after this little energetic process, God, like, I'm sure on some level we would all have an indwelling, inculcating principles starting to take place within us that orientates us in some way, shape or form to our day-to-day life, that might actually be in stark contrast with what actually is. Like, I mean, it's like, wow, like, I mean, just this urge inside. And that's what we're sort of being compelled or asked to put into action. And in fact, where it's orientated is right at the base of, like, if we look at when the new moon takes place, it's right at the IC of the chart. So in a way, what brings us stability at this time, what brings us, clarity at this time is putting our principle into action. That is our ground. Like, people go, well, how do we ground in this energy? Well, it's, you have to put your principle into action. That's the grounding of it. And like, that can take many, many shapes and forms. And again, it doesn't have to be grandiose or enormous. It just means putting what it is that you aesthetically, value, and putting your worth into action. Put your principles, a little bit up front, rather than just absolutely conforming to the conundrum of existing form. And like, because that's what's being asked right now to be dissolved. Yeah.
I love that, Martin. I only just heard last night. This is amazing.
Yep.
The principles of the chakra and the chakras,
Yep.
and then, like you say, maintaining the grounding and the self worth and all those basic elements that we all need.
Yep.
And yes, we can go up through the chakras into divinity all the way to the end. But as we go up. We're expansion as far as our third eye and everything else. The analogy I got listened to last night. Sorry.
Oh.
You there? Sorry,
You
mate.
there, Billy? Mate. Yep.
Yeah. The analogy I heard last night was without those principles and the grounding and the boundaries that we put, not boundaries in a limiting point of view, but just having those principles that you talked about. The analogy I got shown was like a balloon, like a helium balloon. Wants to fly, wants to go, but if it hasn't got those principles of knowing which direction and having an understanding and having that grounding, it'll fly off and it'll just go wherever the wind takes us. Which feels good and it's fine. Like there's an element of allowance and surrender to that, but at the same time, it's literally going to go wherever the wind takes it, and that might not that may not serve the purpose of those principles that they and if they don't, that's the analogy that the balloon doesn't have any principles, so it just goes willy-nilly, and
that's right.
Yeah, there's a good thing about that freedom, but at the same time, so it seems to be that balance of having the.
You're right, Billy. Yeah, like because there is that relationship between form and lack of form. There's this eternal relationship between Neptune and Saturn, in the sense that Neptune is where it goes. It's the divine sort of flow of life, so we could on one hand absolutely chill out, go with the flow and just roll with it, but that will ultimately just take us somewhere, and we're not really participating in anything other than just going with the flow. On the other hand, you've got the principle of Saturn, which is structure and form. And yes, it is limitations and all those types of things, but it's also boundaries and it's efforts and it's bringing things into action. So you can't really have an idea, Neptune, unless you've got some effort and some boundaries and some action to bring it into being. So there is this constant interplay between the formed and the unformed world, and I think it's pretty dominant at the moment because with Neptune in Pisces, that really accentuates that formlessness of life. Pisces is Neptune's ruler, so and at 29 degrees, it's the ocean of life. If you wanted to get all biblical, it's kind of like the flood. It's the flood that comes in and just purges all things, all manner of forms, and it just immerses us in the infinite potentiality of everything, and not much really would survive an inundation like that. Then if you look at Saturn, the actual agent of structure, right now and for a while now, Saturn's in Pisces, and so on top of this enormous deluge of Neptune in Pisces, there's the actual planet that would normally provide us this concrete representation of structure and form. It too is dissolving. It too is in the formless reaches of Pisces and that type of thing. So there really is a very big potential now for things to not actually have definite form and boundaries to be crossed. So even in our own lives, it's really important right now energetically that we actually set boundaries. Otherwise we could find ourselves easily overcome by obligation to whatever. So discernment and critical thinking right now is important. So is just analyzing the details, fact checking, all that. I mean, gosh, the misinformation and disinformation craze of 2024 is well and truly underway. And that's all of this Pisces stuff. And a lot of it's true and shocking. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying, but just the fact that the government, Saturn, is calling misinformation, that's Pisces. That's just a fine representation of the energy that we're in. But so what is also available though is because Saturn resonates at that level of Pisces, we've also got the ability to enforce structures or implement structures that help us realize what it is that we want to emerge from. So in a way, all the previous times before now, the previous cycle that we've been through, we're in the dissolutionary phase of that. And I mean, when you think of Saturn and Neptune, they do a 36-year dance through the zodiac. And so everything from about 1989 till now is coming to its structural dissolution point to be reformulated and reinvented. And because Neptune and Saturn go into a conjunction early next year again to start that cycle again. So really, this is the ending of the need to be attached to old forms for the purposes of giving us an opportunity to recreate or restructure or reinvent new forms, but through our principles and through our what we hold of value, to actually start that process of putting it into shape. But yeah, it's a sort of it's a change over time. You know, it's a
so
dissolve one. And
so when we're talking about principles, it can be things like loyalty and personal traits and that. So we're not compromising those. So we're very rigid and steadfast on those because they're important to us. But then we have the fluidity of what may or may not happen. So we have might set ourselves a goal, for example, and an intention of where we want to head, a new job, new business, something going on in our lives, and wanting that to happen, maintaining those principles that we talked about, but still having that allowance to be creative and also surrendering a little bit to where, okay, sometimes we want to go from A to B in a straight line, and we know life doesn't work like that. Maintaining the principles at the same time and that grounding, but also allowing that creative flow to happen. So not restricting ourselves creatively to
we need that. We need that earth element. Like, we need the practicality, we need method. You know, that's very strong. It's very required at the moment, particularly, you know, all the Taurus moon sort of brings that in. It brings in that earthly sensibility, but at the same time, it's got all this sort of liquidity in there. So, like, we need to have structure. We need to have boundaries. We need to have a defined plan. We need to then start working out methodology to bring that into existence, because otherwise it's just an idea. You know, like, it's just a feeling or a form. And sometimes too, this is where the sort of the negative interplay comes in, that if we don't have a plan, or if we don't have a routine, or if we don't have clear boundaries or structures, then that Neptunian, that untamed Neptunian aspect of things dissolves our sense of reality, or dissolves our sense of place, and we then become a victim, or suffer, so to speak, suffer the limitations that we're experiencing. So, like, I mean, and limitations is Saturn when it's not in our hands. Like, self responsibility, they say, is the greatest cure for limitation, because it not only puts it into real perspective, it actually gives us the opportunity to move beyond the perceived blockage that we have. So essentially it's engaging those water earth dynamics appropriately, and realizing that we can manifest our idea or our vision or our creativity through actual consistent applied methodological effort, and keep it real and keep it structured and keep it happening in that way. But on the other hand too, Billy, like, it's that same old thing. If we're too confined by existing structures, and we're inflexible to the new, and if we're inflexible to what's possible, then we're totally contained within stale form, and that stale form, can actually appear to be dissolving, or appear to be being eroded, and create, fear, or create trepidation, or create a sense of disorientation, as the tides of Neptune sort of going, no, let's reorganize this, let's get it looking like something else. So, that's where, it's important to both have that flow, but that constructive approach to life, like you say. That's really, that is really important, and really important right now. Like, it's in this time that we're in, like, it is, for want of a better word, like, this moon, the symbol for 18 degrees of Taurus is, a new continent rising out of the ocean. So, like, it's got this enormous burgeoning forth of fresh potential, and it's just, that's what it is. It's fresh potential. It's a new continent. There's no cities on it. There's no infrastructure on it. There's no there's nothing there, but it's the fresh potential coming forward in a tangible way for us to apply ourselves to it. And I suppose if you had one of those, role-playing games or whatever, it'd be like having this, what is it, Age of Empires or whatever. It'd be this undeveloped slate where we've got to go and find resources, we've got to go and find the right people, we've got to work out the best place to be, we've got to start to put all those things into action and start developing these new systems and these new economies of mind, so to speak. But we've got a brand new continent from which to do it, and part of that new continent, if you think of it in historical terms, like say the Mayflower heading from England to America to discover the Americas or whatever, there requires a very firm surrender to the past, like a leaving and releasing from and getting rid of all the ghosts of the past, because they are not as useful to us in the new land as they were in the old land. And so, what is the, I suppose if you think of it in that terms, like what's the point of, I don't know, like high philosophy or something like that, if you've really just got to clear some paddocks to grow some trees? Like, I mean, it's actually applying the proper perspective to what we're doing and bringing it into a practical context so that we can actually achieve the right outcomes at the right time. So, that's the thing, like we really do have to reorientate ourselves at the same time, but in a good way, like in a refreshing way, I guess. Like that's what really stands out around that moon, because there's a real end of cycle and a real liquidation of the past. And like, I suppose even as I talk into that, the ascendant for it as well is realizing that there is this, it's quite a nice symbol actually. It's realizing that there's this invisible hand at work, like there is this invisible force at work with us that's there to guide us in the shape that we're trying to take. And like, we could call that our higher self, we could call that the divine hierarchy of providence, or the great logos of our times, or whatever. But there is this definite unseen structure at play that is there if we just engage it creatively and engage it openly and engage it with our creative intent. It's really there to support and guide us and influence us, in a directional sense at this time. So, like it's a brand new time. And one thing, sorry to keep going on it, but one thing too that is really interesting around the energy, if we feel into it from this context, it's this, Pluto's the only sign in air, right? So like you've got all this, you've got Jupiter, Uranus, New Moon, Sun, Venus, all in Taurus. So incredibly, Taurian energy. So, persistent and grounded and practical and real. But then you've got, Chiron and Mercury and the North Node and Mars all in Aries. So again, it's inspired, it's creative. So there's this inspiration and practicality coming through. You've got, two big players. The two planets of reality are both in water. So in amongst this creativity and this sort of persistence to bring things into form, there's this real dissolving, lack of form energy taking place, which is there to wash away anything old so that we can, disassemble it or give it the ability to reform or restructure with our creativity. But then on top of that, Pluto is out there on its own, sort of in air, and it's the only sign in air, and it's transformative, right? So there's this action of transformation taking place not only at the level of intellect or level of interconnection or intercommunication, but it's also that medium between us and the world. So there's a real breakdown in our connection, if you like, or our transmission process in what we're doing now. So the way that looks, sort of symbolically is the kind of idea that we need to desocialize or repudiate in some way, like break free from the mold, so to speak, and kind of say no to the expectations of what is, like, I mean, it's a real not white fence, it's not the picket fence energy, like this is actually what's new, what are we going to do, in other words, the interface between us and other is what's under review, and it's going to be under review in a way that kind of asks us to consider what it is to be socialized. And when I say socialized, I'm purely probably coming from a negative point of view, where socialization in a way takes away our individuality, takes away our creative spark, it takes away our kind of ability to initiate ourselves on the basis of our principles. And so, that's probably the big standout feature here, is an enormous creative energy along with an enormous dissolving capacity, which ultimately sets us up to want to repudiate or disassociate with old conventions for the purposes of creativity.
Yeah. So it feels like there's a real change, like you say, the shift from conformity. So, like you say, that social side of things, I want to fit in, if I want to do the right thing, my friends, my family, my circle of people who I interact with, a lot of times do reflect on what's happening inside. But as we shift and as we change and explore ourselves, I would invite everyone out there, and I know it's happening for me, to explore the relationships and to be open to new people and new relationships coming into your life, because as we evolve and as we expand and change, I feel, and I could see it happening before my eyes with not just myself, but having multiple conversations. A lot of people seem to be going through that, Martin. So that social construct that we're so used to, and the powers that be would love us to be, and we hear of smart cities and everything else, that but without getting too negative, that's very confining, and that this is where you're going to live, and this is our, wherever you live in the world, this is my life, this is my almost limitation. I'm sitting in this dish here, and this is where I go, this is where I go to work, this is my circle of friends and family, and this is all I have. But quite often that can be restricting. And I guess where I'm going is that exploring that now, that shift, that old form is not working internally, therefore reflecting out externally as well. That our whole way of looking at socializing and our way of living, it will, I think we've talked about or touched base on it before, rather than be competition and competitive and me versus the rest of not just friends, but in business sense or wherever it is, actually enhancing our lives and encompassing and encouraging each other and showing each other love and compassion. Is there some relevance there? That's
absolutely, Billy. Like it is that paradigm shift. It's in a way it's sort of, if we look at Pluto and Aquarius for argument's sake, that's that duality that's emerging there. Is like, on one hand, we've got the tyranny of technology. Government is at breakneck speed trying to get us into, dehumanize us down into these technocratic little enclaves, if you like, that take away our humanity. On one extreme. On another extreme, it's the empowerment of human spirit. And so we've got the human internet springing up. We've got that sense of interconnectedness, we've got that sense of awareness, we've got that raise in vibration. It's just, I love the dualities in things. Like, on one hand we've got 5G, and on the other hand we've got 5D. The two schools of thought. It's like, wow, like I can either subject myself to a contract of dependency and fall into the disempowerment of a technocratic city that is totally encapsulated by a 5G network that completely programs and informs my chakric sensibilities, and as I become awakened under this Aquarian vibration, that electromagnetic field informs me who I am to be me, which is pre-designed and pre-slotted into a technocratic design by those, as they say, in a greater position to know our well-being. And on the other hand, though, there's this emergence of an energy which lights us up on all our chakric levels to awaken us out of the materiality of desire down here on the navel level, to help us transcend the restrictions and competitiveness of our solar plexus mentality in our solar plexus chakra, to move beyond sheer possession and sheer attainment and sheer defense of resources and things like that, and then open into an open heart space through which we can then project and transmit our creative intention. So that is a ginormous duality that's playing out right now, because we're in a very early infantile phase of Pluto and Aquarius, but the dualities are very real. They're very real and they're very present. And what's to say that by the time they invent a chip that goes on our head so that we can telepathically implant our brain with a chip, whether or not they're one in the same continuous expression, wouldn't that just be maybe coincidental with the time that if we were operating on a human level, we could telepathically communicate anyway? That's what I wonder. Like it's like, well, okay, what is the duality and where do I sit in the duality? Or does the duality have a midpoint? Does the duality have a middle ground where awakened humanity yoke and harness the joys of technology in a way that is decentralized, so that, in other words, there's no, higher elite hierarchical manifest form to, decide what's good and bad for us. If we then come to that collective awareness, why can we not then find the benefit of both? But I guess the human condition is the determinant there. It comes down to who we are, what we aspire to, where we go, where we're heading. And I mean, that's going to be up for review, though, Billy, I think, too, soon. Like when Saturn and Neptune form a conjunction next year, early next year in Aries, again, we have this sort of revisiting of reality versus the divine. How creative mind and real mind see themselves entwined. And one could say, just to further that, one could say this humanistic vision of enlightenment, so to speak, or this humanistic vision of awakening versus the technocratic nightmare of digital control. Those two polarities, in a sense, really comes down to a discussion around how reality and vision work together, and because really there's no humanity in a technocratic digital city. There is none. It doesn't exist. We do become reduced to a collective herd that is there for the service of a greater, more organized being. But in the divine state of total human awareness and consciousness, what is the organizing principle? What is the ultimate expression? Like, how do we reconcile the planes, so to speak? How do we reconcile the different planes of awareness whilst living on the one shared, cohabiting world? And I mean, that in itself requires maybe new streams of thought or new streams of perspective or new streams of understanding, and which I think will arrive. They're coming down the line, so watch this space. That's what's exciting. That's what's exciting too.
Yeah, definitely very exciting. And it will be really interesting to see what comes like you say next year and beyond, really, with that duality. I love that opportunity that we all get to choose in many ways, that how we want to live, how we want to evolve as humans as a collective, but more, just as important individuals as well.
Absolutely.
And I guess allowing others to make their decisions as well. So this construct that we're in at the moment, where we've got the powers that be, so to speak, want to make us all or fit us all into the one box, and we've got more and more ID numbers now, and AI coming in that we're not, they're almost removing us as individuals and as our sovereign, where a lot of us are starting to go, hang on, I want to become more sovereign. I want to become more of me. That duality of both of those, one pressing from this side and one pressing from this side.
That's right.
And then you've got that duality, like you say, as far as and we both probably know people that are happy to, and I use this very simple analogy of you go to the shops now, and some people are hell-bent. They want that human experience, and they want grocery shops. They want to talk to the cashier and, hey, how's your day going? How's Uncle Bob? What's going on? Particularly in the smaller towns. And then there's other people who do a beeline for the automotive. They don't want to speak to anyone, and there's no right or wrong there, but that duality is starting to unfold.
It is
as we speak. So we're in the early infantry stages, as you say, but that's only going to expand into every aspect and every facet of all our lives and how we choose to exist.
Exactly. And I mean, I think if I looked back at this a while back, like last time Pluto was in Aquarius, it takes us back to off the top of my head, just as you say that, it reminds me of this, but like it takes us back to about 1280 or something thereabouts. And if you look back at that time, we had the emergence of, I think it was the Dominican monks, the order of the Dominicans, who were all about science and education, and they went around and tried to teach everyone language, and they tried to go, because Aquarius is very intellectual and it's all about informational technology. And so that there was this inspired movement of religious, at the time, obviously, because that was the collective formation of that time. But they were this order that went out and wanted to bring everyone up to speed, or bring everyone up into this, probably what would have been called a digital age back then, which was the age of just literacy, essentially. And we now find ourselves after a grand cycle of Pluto through the signs. We're back at another point where, yes, we're being upregulated again into this new technological era, or new technological sort of scape, where you either speak or you either read and write, or you don't. And but at that time too, there was also this huge divergence of belief systems, a huge divergence of discovery. You had the pure, literalists, who thought that you had to, be read and write in Latin and all these types of things. But there was also great advancement in Epicureanism. There was great advances in other philosophies and other ways of being. I guess it just became a problem where I think eventually what emerged from that time, if you look at the process of it, I think it ended up with the Inquisitions, and it ended up with, the burning of people at the stake and all that type of stuff, because, it just became so taken that unless you were like this, or unless you thought this way, then you mustn't be of the same fold, and therefore, you're a heretic, or you're otherwise. So, along with great advancement, in other words, I guess what I'm saying too is, along with great advancement and kind of evolution in a certain area, comes this sort of objectivity, or this almost separation or polarization, which then can potentially become quite judgmental and quite ostracizing in its outlook as well. And that's what I fear, I guess. I shouldn't say, but I mean that's one of the potentials I see with a technocratic world, is that it'll eventually reach a point where if you don't have A, B, and C, and if you don't fit the mold, and if you don't tick the box, you really can't survive. You're not really wanted. You're not required, and essentially you're outside the scope of the belief system, and you'll be persecuted. And history's just repeated that over and over and over again. But I think we're at another very unique period where it's sort of taking a similar form. And I think that in a sense that's the ups and downsides of Pluto and Aquarius too, where with great innovation and great advancement comes this emergence of a mindset which could then become quite ostracizing and objective. And so, the middle path is always to be strived for, in any great idea, because, every great idea ultimately polarizes off an old idea.
Yes.
And it's if we can find the middle ground somewhere in the middle. But again, Uranian intellect is different to say Neptunian, vision or Neptunian plan. So, while we have these technological advances, there's also belief and philosophy behind it, and ideations and mindsets that, ultimately, I think one of the challenges too, I think, is self-responsibility. And, so if we have this unconditional contract that we're all going to be looked after and taken care of, then we're going to become very quickly part of a digital technocratic state, because really we're just surrendering to the flow of whoever's willing to become organized quicker. And if they get out there and quickly organize along their lines of philosophy and plan and idea, and outdo or outstrip the rate of evolution or actual practical application, I should say, because we're all evolving rapidly. But if we got ourselves organized and applied ourselves practically at the same rate, I think anyone's capable right now of creating a technocratic state in which they can become dominant in, because it's all available, it's all new, it's all burgeoning. So, really at some point, I think it does come down to as well that, hang on a minute, if that's your trip, go for it, have it, but leave me out of it. Leave me alone. And I think that's if I had to drill into what really worries me at the moment, Billy, it's there's a lot of people really running with whatever idea they've got, but they're forgetting on some level that we all have to live on the one planet.
Yeah,
and we all have our own little place in that, and so that's again, there's the primary source of emerging tension.
And we're not. It's not a groundless fear. Without using, I know we both don't like using that word, but that awareness anyway. That history has shown us that that's generally the path, regardless of the era and the even the location. That tyranny has become a force for a period of time until there's that shift where the people start rising up. Whether that happens this time, whether it needs to happen, but I love what you said, even about the analogy of the telepathy. We are evolving as humans. We are evolving of what our capabilities are and expanding. So, like you say, what comes first, or are they both going to happen simultaneously? And then it's down to choice of which way you go. While I was listening to you then, I just thought of like the technology, like AI, and it's very relevant and will become more and more prevalent with the farming industry. Where does our food come from? I was very lucky in my childhood in high school anyway, we had agricultural farms at school, so we learnt how to plant crops, how that whole system worked. We also had farming animals, so we understood, we had a basic understanding anyway of life and where food comes from. We didn't just go to the shop and get this meat, and there is a push now for lab made meat and all that sort of stuff. And like you say, if that's your jam, go for it. Just leave me out of it. And one thing I do see is that people are moving into smaller and smaller housing with limited areas to, even if they wanted to grow their own plants and gardens, that capability is not there. But then I look at other people, and myself is definitely, and I know you are as well, that love getting their hands dirty and love the cycle of life and love like moon planting. Like we want to maintain that awareness and I mean, let's face it, for me personally, the food tastes amazing. Food tastes more. It's not snap frozen. It's not thawed out that you sometimes get at the shops.
Absolutely.
And it's nutritionally better for you. That's probably a talk and a debate for another time, but that comparison and that polarity that we're talking about, do we want convenience? Convenience can be beneficial, but also can be detrimental to us long term, I think. Yeah.
Absolutely. No, 100%, Billy. I totally hear you. And again, that I suppose that talks about a polarization too, like you say. Like, on one hand, we've just become, I suppose as a side effect, because this is still relevant, like we're in the changeover. Pluto's still going to dive back into Capricorn very shortly. In fact, it's just gone retrograde. So like we're about to go and revisit this last attachment to structure versus flow, like Earth versus Saturn, really. Like, and there is this thing where, yes, in our reaching to become corporatized and very Saturnian, like very worldly and, caught up in our structural design, so to speak, we've been offered the opportunity to forget about nature, forget about the moon, forget about the earth, forget about that real connection to abundance, as in what the planet actually produces, like what is available as a product, rather than just the bureaucracy idea that if you find yourself higher up on the pyramid than someone else, then you've got a better chance of abundance. Like that's so Saturnian. It's so Capricorn. And, Pluto's sort of in its last throes now of ripping the rug out from underneath that and sort of reintroducing us, I guess, to say, look, no, this is where it comes from. Here's the farm, there's the distribution network. Okay, but it ultimately has to come from the farm. It ultimately has to come from the earth. And how does the earth work? Well, the earth is material. It's manifest. It's creative. It's like it flows with the moon. It is essentially the organic matrix behind our existence. So like, but up until now, there's been such a beautifully, strong orientation. When I say beautifully, it's for good or bad, but like there's been such an obsession with structure and hierarchy and Capricornian things that, I think there will come a time where if you look at the Capricornian elite mentality, so to speak, that rises out of the executive mentality, sooner or later they'll just be cutting the branch off that they're sitting on, And like, sooner or later, if you cut that branch off, it's gonna fall, because you don't realize that they may have forgotten where it's actually connected to,
Yeah.
and where it comes from.
And ultimately, Martin, like you say, the people that are, let's say, really successful, they become CEOs. And I'm not having to go at anyone here. Like, each to their own. Everyone's got their journey and their path and their objectives. So, what I know a few people that have reached that, monetary successful, and their career-wise has been fantastic, but they still don't have that inner peace and happiness, because they've had that striving and it's worked for them to a point. But then I compare that to people that still live in Bali and Indonesia and other places where they don't have a lot materialistic wise, but they have their little farms, and each property is self-sufficient, and they have their little local market where I'm growing what I'm growing, and I'll share that with you, and I can make clothes, and they're very basic level, but the peace and the happiness and the community that they have, for me and my observations, and their happiness far outweighs the commercial success, or that Capricornian way.
Exactly. The fruits are a product of the roots, and so really, that holistic living, that sort of not wanting for much but not missing much, like that's I guess closer to what we would call harmony, or that's living closer within our means, so to speak. Like it's that that living within the scope of our own constraints, but at the same time enriching, while at the same time gaining. So that's probably the middle ground we're talking about. But the Pluto in Capricorn has been so structurally extreme on that level, where it's just domination rules out by attrition, like it's just that whole loss of connection with where it really comes from. And I mean, even symbolically, if you look at it, the moon, is the opposite of Capricorn. So Cancerian energy is opposite to Capricornian energy. But like, if you even just feel into the collective unconscious at the moment, the moon represents the collective consciousness. And so, the Pluto's been at the opposite of that in the sign of governance. And so, like, here's this emergence of this, like, incredibly, almost psychopathic organizational, because Pluto, I suppose a good word for Pluto in its worst extreme is psychopathic. But like, there's this psychopathic kind of structural element that's just come in and completely dominated the collective, and it's just completely forgotten about the ground level, the people, the actual people, for the sake of its own psychopathic identity with hierarchical dominance. And so, but in that sort of separation, the people are sitting there going, "Hey, dude, we can see you. Like, we can see what's going on. You forgot about us." And like, so I think that we're at the midst of that separation point. We're at the midst of realizing the two extremes of the Capricorn Cancer polarity, and obviously there is a point of harmony in the middle. And I think that the beautiful part is nature and justice and life will always seek out that harmonious midpoint, and it's just a matter of time and staying out of the fray, so you can arrive back at the center in one piece. Right. Like, and just kind of directing yourself towards that center. But like, we're there. We're at that turning point, and I suppose the sustaining energy behind that is Saturn and Neptune, in a way, where as we go back into this retrograde, as we realize the weaknesses and strengths of both our dreams and our real structures, as that comes together to be reinvented in a new form of both belief and structure around it, we're in the ultimate decay leading up to that now. And but in that decay, it's a point of envisioning. It's a point of recognizing, and I suppose that's what's exciting. On the other hand, it's absolutely like, wow, look at this that's taking place. But the exciting part about it is the power that we have individually and as a formed collective. When I say formed collective, the people we hook up with and the relationships we nurture and the ideas that we sustain or the ideas that we admonish, like, that's our choices right now. We don't have to get up on the world platform and participate in something grand. We really just have to say yes and no appropriately, and to the right things that we want to choose. Like, I mean, it's up to us. Like, rather than be frustrated at the lack of community centralization and humanistic, evolution, go and buy your veggies at the greengrocer. Go and find a butcher. Give your money to the butcher, give your money to the baker, give your money to the greengrocer, and tell people how good it is. That's it. That's all we got to do. Like, I mean, we just got to start being it. And if you don't like the tyranny of overreach or the tyranny of the ego of concentric sort of corporate power, don't give it energy. Don't ascribe to it. Don't think it's wonderful. I mean, we had the 80s for that. Gordon Gekko, greed is good. But I mean, it's not. It's really not. Like, it's rubbish. Like, I mean, just stop it. Like, I mean, in that way. But if you think it's great, go for your life. Like, I mean, that's awesome. But don't think you can just put yourself in whatever idealized setting you are in and expect that to resonate through the entire mass, because it just won't, and it shouldn't have to, because that's just not how it works.
Yeah, exactly. And I love that analogy, and well, the reality, really, it's a great advice, and I certainly follow that ourselves. And you're keeping that energy exchange where you're handing money over, and bartering as well. I've seen that coming in locally here. They've got groups coming in, and it's just fantastic to watch and see that unfold. How that can happen. The exchange is not just you might be handing over some tomatoes, but you're also exchanging a smile and an energy and getting to know each other. And that then, if someone's in trouble, I got to help our neighbour down the road because they're bogged, or whatever situation happens where
that's it.
But I guess too, I wanted to I love what you just said there, but probably if anyone that's listening out there, try to do what Martin just said, that make a decision, but make it from the heart, and also try to avoid judging others for making different choices. So I think that's really important. If you make your decision, go in it all wholeheartedly, and go in it with everything that you've got, but also don't hate on the others. There's no point, and I think we're moving away from that. A lot of us are. We're moving away from that structure and that mindset, because that doesn't serve any purpose. And you've got to be really attentive to your energy that you're expelling out as well. Because it does come within, and you're co-creating. So if you want more hate, if it's like looking at someone doing the wrong thing, and then if you're judging that person, and that's fine, that you're not condoning their actions, but if you really, you can say, no, I don't want a part of that. That's not I don't agree with what they're doing. Then not just say walk away, but at the end of the day, you can have that exchange, but do it from the heart space, and have your boundaries. Say no, stop. I'm not engaging or participating in that, but you go on your way as long as they're not hurting you and others. Rather than get into this fighting mode where we need to hate on anyone that's not necessarily following the same path.
Well, it's not constructive, and it's really just being drawn into the opposition. It's being drawn into the very polarity that you're trying to get out of. Like, I mean, it is like it's just, that's the thing. Like with Aquarius energy or Uranian energy, it's polarizing. It's me versus you, and like, so on one hand it's like, well, I don't like corporate structure. I think they're all maniacs, and on the other hand, I just want to live in a utopian sort of biodynamic world of harmony and love, and like, that's okay, like that's cool. But if it's in opposition to something else, if it's like, I want to do this in the face of that, that's an opposition. Like it really is. Like, and the energy on both sides will be equally as strong. The more you get into your biodynamics, the more the Department of Agriculture will try and legalize things that do against it. And so really, that being aware of that opposition or that duality, is good for the sake of consciousness and for the sake of awareness, because without that duality, we're just simply not aware of something that needs to grow. But once we are aware of what needs to grow, just align yourself with the middle ground, which is the principle or the value, and go, okay, cool. I don't like that and I prefer this. Well, what's the value? The value in it for me is this. And so I'm just going to ascribe by that value. And I think that's the principle of Taurus as well. It's like, well, whatever it is that I value, my identity can align with that and I can bring it into being. And so if we can get out of polarization and get out of that sort of tearing ourselves apart in opposition to something, which, mind you, is not a problem because it's what leads to awareness.
Yeah.
Then once we have the awareness, hook onto the value and just start doing it. Hook into it. Be the form that you want to manifest. What do you value? That's when people say, Taurus is our self-worth and our values. It's like, okay, cool. That's what we manifest by. If what it is that we value and what it is that we hold of value, that's what we should be putting our energy into. And for the sake of all else, that's what we do. Not because we don't want to do something else. It's just because that's what we want to do. That's right. What we hold of value. And so really, whenever an opposition comes along, really it's only for the purposes of consciousness. And if we get that conscious awareness and we realize the A versus the B, then that really should just be our trigger to work out what the C is. And that's our value or our new principle. And hopefully what will emerge over this time that we're heading into is a whole new set of principles and a whole new set of values. And, even for this month itself, really that is the challenge. It's coming off the back of Jupiter, Uranus conjunct in Taurus, that's a new view, Jupiter, around a higher set of values, Uranus, for the future. And so, really, this is where we've got to look at, hey, what is it that I value? What is it that I hold as my highest, greater view? And what am I going to do? And how am I going to go about going there? And what do I got to let go of? And what have I got to let flow away with the outgoing tide completely in order to put my energy into these new forms? Yeah. And that's, gosh, Billy, I think that's the summary right there for the new moon. For the new moon.
Beautiful. That's it. All right. Well, I think we've been going, and we could obviously, as we know, we could chat for more hours.
We'll keep it in the constraints of at least a nice long drive or something.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Always enjoy our talks, Martin, and today was fantastic, mate. And thank you very much for joining us. And I love your knowledge and your insights, and you're coming from a heart space. So we might finish it up there. And thank you very much. And enjoy your day, and I'll talk to you soon.
Will do. You have a good one, Billy.
Okay.
I'll catch up with you probably worst case scenario next month.
No problem. Absolutely. Yep. No worries. Thanks, Martin.
See you.